Hello, my name is Kelly Powers, and today I would like to share my research project with you. My research question is, what are the experiences of sign language interpreters working with people with developmental disabilities? What are some added challenges, and what are some strategies we can use to help? The method that I use to develop my research includes three sources of information. First, I draw on the correlations between hearing people with developmental disabilities and deaf people with developmental disabilities. Second, I use the experience of a certified sign language interpreter working with the County Board of Developmental Disabilities. And finally, two research articles, one which focuses on the communication impairments among those with developmental disabilities, and second, one that focuses on the tough ethical questions facing interpreters in their profession. I use these sources of information to identify the additional challenges that come with interpreting for this population, and also to develop strategies that can help interpreters better provide these services. Here are some additional challenges that I've identified through this research. First, finding the meaning of the messages. People with developmental disabilities have communication impairments, comprehension deficits, and no linguistic code for communication. Deaf people with developmental disabilities have often not been taught sign language growing up. All of this can cause challenges in finding the meaning of the messages. Second is access. This population has historically not been provided access to interpretive services. Instead, family members, service providers, staff, and advocates have been the ones providing the interpretation. This creates many years of miscommunication and added challenges for interpreters. Also, there are very few qualified interpreters working in these settings, making it challenging to find colleague support. And finally, the ethical decisions and confidentiality. Because these settings often demand interpreters to step outside of the role of interpreter and become a member of the person-centered planning team, this creates situations where the interpreter has to make tough ethical decisions regarding confidentiality. Now let's discuss some strategies to help interpreters overcome these challenges. When attempting to find meaning of the message, an interpreter will often need to focus on the intent of the message instead. To determine the intent, the interpreter must rely heavily on information they gather about the specific situation and the specific consumer. Another strategy is to start a separate conversation with the consumer in order to rephrase and reframe the information so that the consumer can understand the basics. Then, to provide a synopsis of that conversation. And finally, and the one used most often, is to develop an inference as to what the initial meaning is thought to be, then be able to evolve and change that idea as more information is extracted. This means interpreters must feel comfortable guessing and then admitting when they were wrong. Some strategies for access include becoming active in the education of interpreter services for this population and becoming part of the person-centered planning team. This means interpreters must develop positive professional relationships with the providers and staff and make sure that they are aware of the right to an interpreter for these consumers. Interpreters must feel comfortable with stepping outside their role as an interpreter and assist the consumers in gaining access to interpreters. Finally, the really tough one. This one is very personal for everyone and can be difficult to develop one strategy that works for all interpreters. Most important is to always do an evaluation of your own work and reach out to other interpreters for support and help with the tough decisions. All interpreter work is difficult, but interpreting for people with developmental disabilities has some added challenges and requires some skills and strategies to overcome them. This research paper attempts to provide some information and tips to equip interpreters in this setting with insight into how to provide interpreter services to people with developmental disabilities. All deaf people deserve the proper access to communication, no matter what their needs. And I hope in the future the developmentally disabled population will have greater access. Thank you very much, and I hope this presentation was informative.